What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below. As usual, this video is entitled The Voiceless Single Parents Kids. I'm not talking about the kids who are actually kids. I'm talking about the people who are 18 and up in society right now. Because what really happens is, when you talk about single parents, and since single parents really predominantly mean single mothers, who really doesn't have a voice in the matter, who should have a voice in the matter, are the kids who are actually 18 and up, the ones who are grown, the ones who may be in relationships, who may have kids, who may have families themselves, who may be married now themselves. Because when it comes down to these situations, we talk about how the kids wind up. That community is voiceless because on one end, when they're kids, they're silenced because they're kids and they don't have a say-so until they hit a certain age, but they're not really able to talk in retrospect. And on the other end, when they become adults, they're viewed as adults, and whatever happened in their childhood doesn't matter, right? You grown and you get over it. But what's stuck in the interim is that's probably your best group of people in this society of raising rates of single parenting to tell you how the pitfalls of it. But nobody asked them. Nobody asked these people when they're grown, okay, what are the signs of a mother who's doing right and a mother who's doing wrong? You don't have, you don't see people going to court and say, look, I was raised by a single mother, I was raised by a single father, and when they did these things as an adult, I figured out that they either had my best interests at heart or they didn't have my best interests at heart. See, there are no advocates to say who's lying while they're in court. You know what I'm saying? Like, you keep hearing these judges keep getting caught up in rhetoric, and we hear the same story, but nobody understands things like, parental alienation or the brain, or what the brainwashing of a kid looks like, or the nuances of you could be saying the right things, but somebody could tell you that you coach, and somebody could tell you how it's going to end up after the situation is over. No, people aren't out here able to speak their truth, so society knows what's going on. I mean, to a degree, society learns what's going on because society has to deal with the fallout, and this happens in the majority of Americans' family at this particular point. But I find it weird that, the children of single parents are voiceless, because how could you, like, these people wind up having kids, and everybody talks about fatherlessness when they're children, but nobody asks that same community of children who become adults, do you talk to your mother as an adult? Nobody asks how many kids from single parent household became adults and maybe grew up in a fatherless situation. As an adult, they're totally detached from their mother. Nobody talks to them and asks them why. And I see this far too often. Nobody asks, why these adults are worried or don't bring their children around their custodial parent that much, or don't trust them to take care of their child. Nobody asks that. Because it will give the world insight to say, oh, this is what's going on. Nobody asks, like, okay, the reason I'm having relationship issues is because I was taught to lie, cheat, and steal from the opposite sex, or I watch the opposite sex lie, cheat, and steal. So I look at all the tales, and I may be jaded, or I may be able to pick out the nonsense before it happens, and I have trust issues. And nobody cares about that because you grown. But it would shine a light on the way that society is working because, like I said, the majority of people are coming up in this way. Nobody asks the question about what are the spending habits of single parents, and nobody asks the question. These people who are adults, and I could tell you, okay, because they have these states where they had the child support stuff put on cards. Well, why don't you find 20 or 100 kids who became adults that could tell you what the money that they saw being spent on? That can be your counsel. See, the kids of single parents are not used as everything else in life. When there has a trend going on in life, you following the trend, and then you studying what's going on, and then you look at the people involved in the trend in retrospect, and you talk to them and say, okay, what did we miss? What did we get right? X, Y, Z, right? They don't do that. They don't do that. And I find that detrimental because in some ways, this is why society is repeating the same cycle over and over and over again, because you're not asking the people who it's already happened to. You're not asking them what they think. You're not asking, well, could the divorce rate be so high because people were taught to not work with the opposite sex? What were you taught as a child, as a man, or as a woman that makes you so quick to call it quits? Nobody asked why people have a hard time apologizing, because they may have been taught to do unscrupulous things, and they had a support system that would back them up because they felt like the courts and the law enforcement will follow their lead if they follow the script. Nobody asks why people have a lying mentality now. Nobody asks why people can instigate fights with other people and then play the victim immediately as if they had been doing this their whole life. Nobody asks, well, where did this come from? Did we see this prior? Like, were you being taught this? Nobody asks these questions. And nobody asks that group. Everybody just goes under the assumption that everybody tried the best they could. And I think that's ridiculous. Because on the flip side, all the negative behaviors that a person may have, you say, you know what, they came up in a single mother household. So ultimately, as a child, they just had the bad luck of the draw by being born in a single mother household. And as an adult, they have the bad luck of the draw because they grew up in a single mother household. Everything that they may have been taught that was detrimental, they're responsible for too. So they're responsible for themselves as children, and they're responsible for themselves as adults. And then they grow to be adults, and you would think society would ask, okay, what's going on? Like, how can we reverse this? Nobody asked the children of these single parents, how do we reverse engineer this situation so we don't have a society as fractured as it is right now? Because nobody wants to hear what they have to say. Because I think what they're going to have to say is really going to throw a monkey wrench in the family court system. It's going to throw a monkey wrench in the educational system. It's going to throw a monkey wrench in how can I say this? In religious sector. It's going to throw a monkey wrench in farmers and pharmaceutical companies and doctors and hospital bills and stuff like that. It's going to throw a financial wrench in a lot of different things. So I don't think people really want to hear that voice because it costs too much. So, you know, when I think about it, that demographic is voiceless. And that's the one demographic that probably has all the information we need to turn America around and even turn the economy around. You know, because what we're doing is we're sending our kids off as you know, lambs to the slaughter by doing the very same things that were done 2, 3, 4 generations in a row, depending on the age groups. And so you have 1, 2, or 3 generations of adults who can tell you unequivocally what's going to work and what's not, but we don't use them as a resource. So that's just my thought on that. We out.